Welcome to the Learning Conversations, an Education Scotland podcast presented by Chief Executive Gillian Hamilton. In every episode, Gillian is joined by teachers, professionals and experts to unpack some of the big questions and topics facing the education sector in Scotland. Over to Gillian as she introduces today's guest.
Today I'm joined by Liz Somerville, Attainment Advisor here at Education Scotland, Nicola Devine, Head Teacher at St Columba's High School in Gourock, Inverclyde, and Gavin Watterson, Quality Improvement Officer in Fife. Thank you all for being here today.
Thank you.
And I'm really excited about today's conversation because we're going to be talking about attendance in Scotland. And I think it'd be fair to say that for everyone working in Scottish education currently, attendance is one of our biggest concerns. And we're going to talk today, we're going to have a conversation around some of the challenges that you're currently facing in local authorities and schools across Scotland, but also really importantly, to hear an inspiring story of success in a school that listeners can take away inspiration and practical activities into their own settings. And as I'm spending lots of time in local authorities, that's what I'm seeing. I'm seeing inspiring stories of people who recognise this as a challenge. So I'm really looking forward to our conversation today. I'm going to kick off with Liz. Liz is one of our attainment advisors, as I said, here in Education Scotland. Liz, you're going to talk a wee bit more about attendance in Scotland currently.
Yep. So in November we produced a paper called Improving Attendance in Scotland, Understanding the Issues, and that paper's available on the internet. If you Google that, you just Google Improving Attendance in Scotland and you'll find it. And in there we really had a really good deep dive into what were the issues currently. And what we recognised was that attendance has been a downward trajectory for some time, in fact since June 2017. And I think COVID has been labelled as a driver for the reduction in attendance, and while it hasn't helped, the trajectory didn't start there. Mm-hmm. We also know that there is clearly a poverty-related attainment gap, and we know that those children who are impacted by poverty are not attending school as much as their counterparts. And we have seen across the country an increase, and this has been since COVID times, of persistent absence. That's absence of more than 10%. And we also know that attending less than 10% has an impact, we can confidently say that, has an impact on attainment. So secondary schools are finding this more of a challenge than primary. Primary are definitely getting there. And what we would also say is that attendance issues don't just start in secondary school, they do start to appear in primary first. So this is a challenge while primaries are recovering faster, it is still a challenge. All local authorities have a stretch aim to improve attendance across the country. So it is something we're all dealing with. We see lots and lots of energy going into addressing this, and we're maybe not always seeing the results for the energy we're putting in. Mm-hmm. And for me, that is about, as Einstein says, if we keep doing what we're doing, we're not going to get any better results and different results. So for me, that is about us thinking about things a little bit differently. And one of the things that we're going to hear Nicola talking about a wee bit later on is just that reflection of, yes, we're spending a lot of energy on supporting absence and all that wraparound support that we put in place for children. But actually, if we want to reduce the numbers of those supporting absence, we need to think about this a little bit differently and think about how do we actually improve attendance and how do we get in there early before the children stop attending. And ultimately, attendance is just a behaviour. We've all chosen to come here today. And, we're all here. That's great. But there's a reason why we're all here, and we all were motivated to come here. And what we need to be thinking about is how do we make sure our children and our young people in school are also motivated to be there.
And I think that's a subtle difference, but a really important one. You were talking there about supporting absence, but actually how do we improve attendance and engagement? And I'm sure that's going to come through in the conversations. I might come back later, Liz, to pick up a wee bit more on your reflections around what COVID did change. Because I'm really struck already. Told you this was going to be an interesting conversation, but I'm really struck already where you're talking about that 2017 start of a decline, and perhaps we're over focused on some of the COVID impacts, but maybe come back to that. But I want to bring Gavin in, because you talked there about local authorities. So Gavin, you're working in Fife, and it'd be really good to hear from you. What does this feel like in Fife right now?
So we have about 180 schools in Fife, and there is variability in the attendance rates of those schools. Just as was being previously mentioned, there is a real poverty element. So the schools, if we look at SIMD, it's roughly 2% drop for each SIMD as you go to most deprived, which equates to quite a number of weeks for those people that are in our most deprived areas per year. For us, what the work that we've been trying to focus on is, and I'm going to put it in 3 bits, noticing early. These are our future non-attenders, and you need a lot of systems around that. So we're focusing on our systems across the local authority, coupled with the information that we have across the whole local authority. The next bit that's really important for me is about really getting to the root cause of it. So actually, again, how do we encourage those really empathic conversations with head teachers, with guidance teachers and the families, and actually look at the analysis until we've addressed what the root cause of it is. Probably not a lot's going to shift, so we really need to do it really supportively, and then taking action on that. So a lot of the work that we've done in the last year, both as an education department, thinking about what's within our gift, and with our multi-agency partners, is thinking about what are the root causes, what even to the extent of that, when we send a letter out to a parent, how do they receive that letter in a way that we mean it to be, which is supportive and encouraging, and actually how do we work with those parents.
And you and Liz have both already spoken then about the importance of that early identification, early recognition. Would either of you want to say a wee bit more about how you do that?
So I can say a little bit more about that. Schools code attendance against lots and lots of different attributes that would be to do with attendance. That's good because it looks a lot of nuance, but it also makes it quite volatile in terms of data. So we use in Fife and across a lot of places in Scotland, we use a Power BI dashboard that takes it out of our core system, CMS, and actually the simplicity of those and the speed of those and getting the right information out is one that we've concentrated on quite heavily to allow the right information to schools in a digestible way, in a way that they can then use that to identify really early slips. If I can say just one more step, what we've also tried to look at is attributes of things that make attendance easier or not attendance. And if I can just pick one out, what we know for primary school is being really young in a year group can affect the amount that you come to school. And there's could be reasons around that, being a wee bit younger, maybe struggling a wee bit with some of the work en masse. So perhaps moving into the future, that's something we would want to really talk to parents about. This could be an effect. It doesn't apply to everybody. There are lots of economic reasons about it, but what does the kind of deeper layers of the data tell us?
Can I just add, I think what you're saying, Gavin, is really important there. It's about looking at your own context and your local authority and identifying the issues that affect you. And I think it's really important that you've highlighted that that's a feature in Fife at the moment. And everybody's issues will be different across the country. As you move from rural areas, if you move to more areas of deprivation, whatever the context is, it's important that people use the data really effectively to identify what the issues are before they jump into solutions.
Yep.
And before, because Gavin, I want to talk to you a wee bit about some of the solutions that you're using. I know that you've got an attendance strategy, so what are you doing specifically in that space? But could you maybe say a wee bit about your experience in Fife and the impact that low attendance is having or can have in children and young people that you're supporting?
So in terms of the impact, then really I often think of attendance, and we were talking about supporting attendance as being continuity of 3 things: learning, relationships and routine. So the things that we know affect the continuity of learning, the continuity of your relationship of when you're not at school, when you have breaks in that. So I suppose part of it is how do we recover from an absence in a way. So, and to give an example, if you're off for a day, you come back the next day and someone says, okay, well, let's go have a quick recap of our lesson yesterday, and let's all pick up from that. You're doing really good teaching around about that recovery. Secondly, we have people who are off for long periods of time. So what we're starting to look at is how do we reintegrate people back into learning as well, and what does it look like for someone who might be quite fearful of the building. I think another bit of work, and this won't show up in any statistics, would be if somebody is, say, hospitalised and they are off for a period of time and they can get tuition for that. Again, how do we make these processes really simple? And all of it comes to, from a practitioner point of view, how do I know what to do? What tools do I use? and what resources can I get to, and how do I do it really simply. So we have a dashboard that we were just about finished and that practitioners would all be able to get to, just to give them everything in one place. It sounds simple, but it can be quite powerful.
And I suppose, Gavin, that transition piece of work is really important, not just at key points, but also I think what you described there is really, really lovely in the fact that if a child is coming back from an absence, all they are worried about is who am I sitting beside at lunchtime? Do I still have friends? Mm-hmm. And I think that's something that's really, really important for children. It's a quick fix. And it's something that a lot of our schools do really, really well already.
Absolutely. But if it's not there, it's another barrier in that space.
Mm-hmm. Yep, definitely.
And we're talking about strategies, and Liz, your point is really well made. You talked there about might be different across different local authorities. You talked, Gavin, about specific context for a young person returning to school. So a one-size-fits-all approach, I think you mentioned that earlier, is not the solution. It's the approaches that work best for you, your school and your young people. And that feels like a time, Nicola, to bring you into the conversation. You've been sitting really patiently because you do have a story to tell in this space. I'm not going to tell your story for you. I'm going to hand straight to you so that you can tell us about your attendance challenges and what you're doing to address some of that.
Thanks, Gillian. Post-pandemic, we absolutely observed a decline in overall attendance and engagement with school, actually, particularly for those young people who were most impacted by poverty. So as a result, we revisited our culture within the school, the systems and the practice around attendance, with a view to further developing the element of rigorous and robust approaches, really to help us measure where we were now by gathering all of the data around post-pandemic, but indeed measuring the impact of planned interventions. Our school is rooted in gospel values, and our culture and attitudes towards attendance are absolutely underpinned by our school values of faith, of ambition, of inclusion and perseverance. And we have an unwavering commitment to ensuring that all staff, pupils, parents, partners are fully aware of the importance of attendance at school through the lens of well-being, attainment and achievement. Whether it be universal approaches, whether it be targeted approaches, we have strategically enhanced and planned further interventions to ensure that all young people are supported, particularly post-pandemic, as we were observing more in terms of anxieties around returning to school, and that was not always related to those young people impacted by poverty. Examples of particular supports around anxieties included daily check-ins, home visits, providing additional resources, but in particular a real enhanced focus around a cluster approach to supporting attendance at school. And that has been a particularly positive impact across Inverclyde, to the point that we are sharing that practice with other clusters. Moving forward, and it was mentioned a bit earlier, one of the areas that we relentlessly focus on in terms of culture among our staff is that unwavering commitment to unconditional positive regard post-absence for young people. We need to make sure that our staff are a pull towards school, that our young people know that they are going to be welcomed back in warmly, that they will feel comfortable, that they will feel safe to return to school, and that actually our relationships with our young people are a pull towards school, despite a period of absence. Ultimately, in terms of culture, we have a shared ownership across our entire school community with all of our staff, our parents, our young people and our partners, and day and daily we continue to promote this.
What a fabulous story. And I always think when you're recording a podcast you can't see the camera, but your face as you were telling that story, you could just see the passion and enthusiasm. And you used that phrase, that unconditional positive regard for every one of your young people. I'm really fascinated. When you started to talk there, you talked about your starting point. It wasn't an attendance strategy, but it was about a culture shift.
Yeah.
Can you talk a wee bit more about that and how you worked with your staff on that journey?
Yes, I mean, when we were revisiting the whole notion of returning post-pandemic, and I know Liz has already mentioned that, attendance was on a downward trajectory prior to that, but it became more acute when we returned post-pandemic. And it was actually about bringing staff and also the voice of young people and parents together to really revisit what is it that draws us towards school? What is it that really motivates us and inspires us to come to school each day? And we really try to revisit that with all of our staff, in fact, all of our young people. So one of the kind of key measures of impact for us around that pull towards school unquestionably has centred around the range of wider achievement activities that were being offered to young people, but more importantly, what was that level of participation? What did that look like? So again, a range of pull factors that we've further developed over the past few years include our drama club. We offer and we present a pantomime each year, and also a musical in the month of June. And these shows are open to all young people, have a really positive impact on attendance, as our young people are not only keen to attend rehearsals, but have also gained a range of social and emotional skills, allowing them to further develop friendships with other pupils in other year groups that maybe they hadn't ever had a conversation with before.
Can I jump in here, Nicola?
Yeah.
Because I think what's also really nice in this story is Nicola's school is about to go on the National Improvement Hub in the next few months around this piece of work. And when we were out filming this piece of work, actually young people telling us, they were telling us exactly what these different activities,
what these pools are,
were actually, and the difference it was making to them.
So just to kind of follow on from there, the developing these friendships, this sense of inclusion, being part of something beyond the classroom, has had a significant impact on so many young people, whether it be front of house, backstage, on stage. There are so many roles and ways in which we are able to include young people, and it's just so invaluable. Another example is our boxing programme. And we work in partnership with a local boxer. He is fantastic. Established a successful mentoring programme around this, which has a focus on physical and mental health and well-being, which is really critical. And again, it's a targeted, identified group of young people from S1 to S3. And they are developing skills in the sport, but they are also embracing all that is mental health and well-being, self-discipline, positive mental attitudes, etc. And the real impact that we see and that our young people can talk about is that enhanced self-esteem, and that there's a real glow around young people when you manage to get them round to the topic of, have you been at boxing today, and so on and so forth. There's a real sense of joy and a real sense of pride in what they themselves are achieving through that. So that's another pull factor. And another that I'd maybe quite like to mention is, in order to further support the emotional needs of some of our young people, we have taken a leap of faith and invested in our own emotional support dog within the school. So we were the first school in Inverclyde to introduce...
There are a few more now.
There are a few more now, which is great. So our school dog, Indy, I must give her a mention at this stage, has quickly become a very valued member of our school community. And again, our young people really benefit from spending time with her, taking some responsibility for her daily care. And building a nurturing relationship with her. Young people will often seek to spend time with her and often come along and offer to take her a walk and so on. And they really feel a sense of comfort and connection with our school dog. So there is definitely an excitement in the air on the days that Indy comes to school. So that's another pull factor. just going back and reflecting back on, aspects such as school shows, drama club or boxing, we've also been very strategic on the days of the week in which these are on offer in terms of rehearsal. So notably, rehearsal for drama takes place on a Friday after school, which our data was telling us for some young people, there was a real challenge there in seeing right through to the Friday. And I'll maybe reference a little bit later on, but we've got a wonderful case study of a young person who has really engaged with the drama club and the offer there, and significant statistical data around impact on the improvement, but I will mention that a little bit later. And equally, our boxing programme, sometimes Mondays can be a little bit of a challenge for some young people returning to school, and lo and behold, we have our boxing at the front end of the week, at the earlier point in the week, to draw young people in.
And those sound like wily ways or big strategic decisions around timing across the working week.
Yes.
I want to come back to curriculum shortly and ask you both around any kind of curriculum adaptations or curriculum pathways that you're thinking about. But I'm really struck, Nicola, Liz, you talked about we can't keep doing the same thing and expecting the same results. And I think you're giving us fantastic examples of thinking differently and getting different results, which is absolutely what we want to happen. I'm interested from both you and Gavin, what are young people saying about the work that's happening in Fife, the work that's happening in your school? What feedback are you getting? Liz, you touched on it really briefly. What are young people saying about the impact?
So one of the groups that we focused on was young people at the point of transition. From primary school to secondary school is one, and I'll come back to nursery in a moment. And that really, the biggest thing that they were saying that is what brings them to school is relationships. And what they can sometimes struggle with was when they're struggling with relationships, either with staff or with other young people. So I think that there's lots and lots of work in Fife and across Scotland about what the different elements of transition look like and having to try to make it as seamlessly as possible. And I think I would add that one of the things that they were talking quite a bit about was some of the effects of relationships to do with some of the technological stuff out of school as well. But I think the bit we really need to focus on is what's in our gift in education. Yeah. And that's making sure that we got our curriculum so that we'd hand over the curriculum from primary to secondary in a way that's coherent, and also that we actually encourage those relationships and all the kind of trips and things that people do at that point, so they're as comfortable as possible. And because we know that at transition, it's young people who have some sort of turbulence in their life at that point that tend to be most negatively affected by the transition. So actually doing it in a bespoke way and universally.
And can I just support that as well, given because some of the research that we've has actually been published since we wrote this initial report would indicate that at that primary 7 stage, while attendance might not be deemed a concern, it was a clear indicator that it will be a concern, and the turnaround point is that 3rd year point where, probably in 1st and 2nd year it's easier for parents to say, get yourself to school, you're not being in the house on your own. Yeah. By 3rd year that can change.
Yeah.
And actually it's easier for children, so we see that trajectory jump dramatically around that, end of 2nd year, begin the 3rd year point. But actually, we could probably predict this.
Yep.
And we could predict those learners in P7, and then we can do something about it faster.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, so that's why I was talking before about systems, which is 100%. How do we start to project ahead to future non-attenders?
Yep.
And what does that look like in terms of profiling and the things that we can do?
Absolutely. And getting it, as you're all saying, getting on the front foot feels a lot easier than dealing with some of the really big challenges that we've got. You talked earlier about persistent attendance, and we might keep... I need a flip chart beside me for the things that I want to come back to in this conversation. Nick, I'm going to come back to you about what your young people are telling you before I pick up some of those earlier themes.
Yeah, well, one of the kind of key areas of focus for us in terms of, again, revisiting what is this pull towards school was really looking at a curriculum refresh. An example of that would have to be our Skills for the Future curricular offer in S3, which is a key point of transition as we are preparing our young people to embark on their senior phase journey. And so what we did is I suppose, involved our young people in designing what we've called our Skills for the Future programme. It is embedded, well, it's enriched by meta skills, I should say. And we were talking to them about what kind of skills do they think are really important for their future, what they think would be really important as they embark on to the senior phase journey, but also skills for life, skills for work and beyond. So they really helped us to shape the Skills for the Future offer in S3, focusing on areas such as creative industries, finance, criminology, barista skills, bakery, and the list goes on. But what was equally important, the skills that they were developing in S3 would be further developed, that there would be a pathway, a curriculum pathway into the senior phase, and that it wasn't just, we drop something into the curriculum and they're end of the lesson. It's relevant, but it's also progressive, and there had to be a pathway and a journey forward for them. So absolutely, when we talk to our young people and we do evaluate, after the end of that first full cycle of Skills for the Future, they are telling us that absolutely has increased their motivation, their engagement, and their understanding of how important skills are for their future. We are also indeed a silver SCQF ambassador school, just moving on to the senior phase a little bit now, and again introducing courses such as mental health and well-being, bakery and creative thinking, again have proved extremely popular with some of our young people in the senior phase, including some of our young people who had previously not been attending school for a significant period of time. So yes, our young people talk positively about our curriculum refresh and are very good at sharing their views with us, but also to help us modify and adapt for future year groups coming through.
Just wondering, Nicola, what evidence do you have that that's actually working?
Analysing attendance data is now something that we do regularly, systematically, but also period by period each day. So in addition to analysing overall attendance rates for individual young people, we drill down into patterns for cohorts and individuals. For example, we identified low attendance patterns on a Monday and a Friday for a number of young people, and as such we adapted our pull factors to address this gap. I'd mentioned earlier the boxing programme. We decided to introduce this at the start of the week. Really positive feedback from young people around this, but interestingly, we had 26 young people ranging from S1 to S3 involved in the programme. And out of those 26 young people, 21, that's 81% of them, displayed an increase and in some cases a significant increase in attendance over a 6-month period. That is evidence of impact. That is data telling us, along with... So another example of the impact of our drama club rehearsals being scheduled on a Friday is that for some young people, this is the real highlight of their week. This absolutely is a pull towards school. And I have a really, really powerful case study. I'm going to choose one pupil in particular here, who has improved significantly as a result of her feeling included and involved, in particular around the drama club. Before joining the drama club, her average attendance was sitting around 80%. This session, her attendance is sitting at 96%. That is astonishing. That is significant. And I'm not suggesting that it is as a result of the drama club only, but I know by talking to this young person that it is a significant contributing factor. She is playing a starring role in our pantomime already this year and will be taking stage again in the month of June in our fabulous production of Wizard of Oz. But it is such a joy to know that some of the measures, some of the factors that we are really, really tapping into in terms of what is motivating young people to attend school and want to feel part and included in our school community, it's having an impact. There is no doubt about that.
I wonder as well, Nicola, I think it's really interesting the fact that this is drama that's this pool.
Yeah.
And I wonder about the wider curriculum. And I think post-COVID, we were very focused on recovering literacy and numeracy skills, and actually how much of the rest of that curriculum, it was drama for that girl, but it might be music for another child, or something else. And actually, how do we make sure that we're going back to making sure that our BGE is a broad general education, so that those pools are happening every day for children?
Yeah, absolutely. As always is the case, especially when you're considering that relentless focus on literacy, numeracy and health and well-being, we are also able to measure over a period of time for some individual young people as a result of targeted interventions around literacy and numeracy. And we do again have case studies around that. We are seeing some really important improvements in young people over a sustained period of time, because like we are all doing across Scotland, we are becoming so data intelligent and so data rich now that we are using that data, and we are using those key transition conversations and programmes with our cluster primaries to make sure that we are getting it right for every child, to make sure that our data is rich, it is informing us, and that we are strategic on planning our interventions with young people, with their parents, with adults who know them very well at that stage of transition, and that we are strategic and systematic around our measuring of impact. Is this working? Do we continue with this intervention, or are we having to really stop and take a moment and rethink our strategy?
So I'm really struck as we've been talking, and on a number of occasions we've talked about a reason for non-attendance is anxiety. Liz, way back in this conversation, I said we'd come back to COVID. And a really quick story from me is I was in a school recently, and I was speaking to a young man who would be in 5th or 6th year now, and he said, "You all made sure that we kept learning, but I had no social life." And that was a really powerful message for me, because we all focused really hard on making sure that learning wasn't interrupted, that our young people kept learning, but that normal social life of a teenager who would have been in 3rd or 4th year at that time, he lost out on an awful lot. And I wonder about the gap in socialising, in relationships. Gavin, you talked earlier about the importance of relationships, and how much that you all feel that that's contributing to some of the challenges that we're facing in terms of relationships and anxiety.
Yep, I think for me personally, one thing COVID taught me is that socialising and relationships are a daily practicable skill. So when you do have gaps in that, I think it does take time to relearn the skills. And I think anecdotally schools would probably talk about that. Certainly when talking to parents, one of the things, and this is again anecdotal, is about how much do I miss if I miss a day. In the way that if a pupil had missed a day or done work in COVID time, what's the kind of correlation between those two in people's minds? I think that's probably something quite interesting to look forward to. One of the things we're doing in Fife, and this is with a group of charities which call themselves Making It Work with Families, is doing qualitative study, and it'll be ready for next February 25, really drilling into those attitudes and those thoughts from the parents. So I don't have anything yet, but I would hope to, and I'd imagine the themes would be very similar across Scotland, but it's really understanding that those roots, what people are thinking. And I think to add to that, what we also do is, in terms of quality improvement, and really kind of looking at that within schools, is doing things like, people will be familiar, fishbones, really drilling into individual cases, and then what learning can we take from those. And I think there's something really important about how do we develop resilience, and how do we actually promote resilience amongst young people.
I think, Gavin, what you're saying is really, really important. And again, we're back to that idea of understanding, and we need to take time to actually really understand what our context is and what it is we need to focus on. But I think we also need to make sure that, whether it's anxiety or whether it's other issues, that actually we're really clear about whatever we're going to try, we're taking an inquiry approach to, so that we can know that what we're doing is in fact working, and not at the end, but all the way through as we go.
Yeah.
And then we do get that wee opportunity, if we really need to adapt, adopt, or abandon it if it's not working, because there's a whole lot of energy going in, and we need to make sure that our energy is well spent.
And targeted. Nicola, what about your young people and changing anxiety behaviours that you might be seeing in this space?
Yeah, absolutely, and there is no question that has been heightened post-pandemic, and there is a significant focus, in terms of our curriculum offer and our wider achievement offer around mental health and wellbeing. We have a lot of input around that universally as part of our PSE programme. But we also have very much targeted support for identified young people who are really finding, levels of anxiety very, very difficult to manage and to self-regulate. And so there are supports there and partner agencies there working with those young people. Resocialisation was a huge factor for schools returning, and I think we have to remember that when schools did return, we didn't return to normality. We returned to 2 metre distance in the classroom, out with the classroom. We didn't return to paired activities, group activities. Teachers were teaching from the front of the classroom, in that physical way. So it's been a significant journey to be able to return to what we may describe as normality, whatever that might be. But that has been an incredible journey for young people and staff. But I want to go back to what Liz said there around making sure that we are really taking an inquiry approach and checking that our interventions are having the impact. And certainly approach that we take in our school centres around a 6-weekly pit stop, where we have a team of staff come together and really look at individual pupils or cohorts of pupils where particular interventions have been put in place to support their journey, and really look at how do we know this is having the impact. And we do ask the young people, but we are looking at data, and particularly around that attendance profile. But we are also becoming wise to consider that it's never usually one intervention that's making the difference. And for every young person, there's a whole story of interventions that wrap around that young person. And I think that's a critical part of our learning through the journey around improving attendance. There's usually a range of factors that are contributing.
And you gave some examples of those. You talked about curriculum pathways, you talked about the school shows, etc. So I think those are really good examples of a number of pools for an individual young person that make up the totality of why they come to school. I'm really struck by how you're using data, both of you, because in this space there's a lot of media interest, and poor attendance makes an easy media headline. I think the more interesting media headline is the innovation and the use of data to improve what we know is a challenge for us. And it's not just a challenge in Scotland. When you speak to people working internationally, they're sharing these stories. And again, a recent conversation with a head teacher, we had a really challenging conversation about the changing in the social contract, because an increasing number of parents are working at home, and it might sometimes be easier to keep a young person at home. You said right at the beginning, Liz, about come on, get out to school. The social contract's changed post-COVID. Gavin, you've touched on the work with parents and some research there, but is there anything else you want to say about engagement with parents and what you're doing differently in that space?
So I think, I'm not sure if this is doing something differently, but running things, like I mentioned letters before, how we communicate with parents and how it is received is one we're re-looking at again. I think that's something from an education department, we have an intention to encourage people to come back to school, but particularly for somebody maybe they didn't feel they had a good experience at school, getting a letter arriving might have a counteractive response. So one of the things we certainly are doing, I don't know if it's different, is actually just really revisiting all of that. One of the ideas for the future could be, instead of a first letter saying, your attendance is such and such, and a postcard saying we're missing you, would you like to come back to, we'd love to see you. And these are the kind of things we're exploring at the moment, but would seem like a good way forward in terms of what we're trying to do, which is encourage people to be at school. I suppose the sort of what's underpinning all of this as I'm thinking about it is we do know what works for young people, which is at least one adult in their life to believe in them. And so fundamentally, it's who is that adult? How do we communicate? And actually, how do we put that across? But I think just a wee thing I wanted to touch on to do with things we're starting to look at is what does it look like in terms of building routine at nursery and P1? And as they actually build that all the way through. And there's early work for us as well. But it seems to me that that would be a start point of actually getting the tone. People love nursery. People have really close relationships in nursery. The parents are in and out all of the time. So, and there's tons of good work across the whole of Scotland there that it seems a point that would be capitalising in terms of those early routines.
And again, that picks up on culture, relationships, routines. Liz, you're bursting to come in.
Do you know, Gillian, whenever I'm listening to Gavin, what is going through my head is autonomy, affiliation and agency, because everything you've described there is about feeling that you belong, you have the right relationships, and we heard a lot of examples for some Columbus there, but we also need that agency of knowing why we're there, what's school offering me, and then that autonomy around how they are going to be involved in improving their own attendance. I think all these things are really important, and that comes back to a piece of research around motivation. And as we've said at the beginning, attendance is a behaviour, and we need to motivate our learners to attend. So if we're motivating them, we need to be thinking under those three headings.
Mm-hmm. And Liz, I know that our attainment advisors are all working in the area of attendance in various shapes or forms across local authorities across Scotland. Is there any advice that you would give for head teachers, educators listening to this podcast around how they can access support that we provide, or indeed any practical next steps for schools?
Okay, so I mentioned at the beginning, we have a dedicated website. It's going to be a one-stop shop. Google it. It's under Improving Attendance in Scotland, and on there you will see, probably around the end of August, beginning September, you will see that page burst. Attainment advisors around the country are currently collating case studies of live examples. People want to know what is working for them. But it's not a matter of just lifting that. You need to take an inquiry-based approach to that to make sure that actually that's then going to work for you. So we are currently creating a raft of case studies that people can engage with. We will also be providing some guidance around policy creation. And actually that, there are some statutory requirements around an attendance policy, and we will make sure that we give you the guidance to be able to meet those requirements, but make it bespoke, not just at local authority level, but at school level, because everybody's attendance concerns and issues are different. And we will also pull together we're currently pulling together some information on effectively using data, and also some guidance around transitions. At the moment, it's transitions at key points of transitions because it's the right time of year to be doing that in June. However, that will eventually roll out to being those softer ones that Gavin spoke about in his conversation. The other thing that we're doing with local authorities is we've established, this is through the ADES PIN network, we've established a local authority network, and we will also be listening to that network to see what else does the local authorities need, what else do schools need. So we are very much being responsive to the needs of the system rather than giving you what we think you need.
Well, that sounds great, and it's actually it feels like a really good balance between listening and understanding to a really local context, but supporting people not reinventing the wheel across Scotland where they don't need to.
And all attainment advisors can support this work individually at local authority level and where appropriate, school level.
So we've had a pitch for the forthcoming resource. We've had a pitch for the Wizard of Oz. Gavin, I don't want you to feel excluded. Is there anything you want to pitch for just before we bring our chat to a close?
I think that just to say that bit about sharing across, all of our authorities. So I really applaud that.
And hopefully what we're looking for as well is that sharing not only of what's been successful, because we're talking about the amount of energy going into this, what we need that network to do is also share what is not successful, so that other people don't waste their energy.
Yeah.
I feel this is a conversation that we could keep going for another hour. I've really enjoyed it, and I said earlier, if people could see the film of this podcast, then it wouldn't be a podcast, then it would be a film. But if you could see the energy and the enthusiasm throughout this conversation, I've been really inspired by it. So I want to say thank you. I want to say thank you to you, Liz, to Nicola and to Gavin, and to our listeners who've been tuning in today. If you've enjoyed this podcast, hit our follow button for a notification when a new episode is published, and keep an eye out on our social media pages for news on the latest episodes. We'll see you soon. Thank you, folks.
Thank you.
Well done.
Thank you.
Well done, everyone.
That was it.
So year on year, of course, we set ourselves achievable targets for individuals and cohorts. So for example, for this academic session, our ambition was to increase the average attendance of all pupils. Last year that was sitting at 88.26%. Our ambition was to increase that to 90% by June 24, which would be an overall gain of around 1.74%. and a reduction in the poverty-related attainment gap. And I am delighted to share today that through relentless, unwavering hard work, commitment and dedication from a whole team of staff in the school, from families, young people themselves, we are currently on target to achieve this by the end of June 24, which is a significant gain for us in terms of overall attendance percentage.
And a real recognition for the work of you and your team for that relentless work that you've taught. Gavin, do you want to say anything about that research piece?
Internationally, school alienation peaks at 15 to 16, so we need to be cognizant of that and work towards mitigating against it. Some of it is actually about how much time you have to sit down at school all day, so that goes back to the curriculum.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. Don't forget to subscribe for notification of when a new episode is published. If there is a topic you would like to hear featured on this podcast, get in touch with us. We'd love to hear from you. Follow us on our social media channels for all the latest news from Education Scotland. Education Scotland is a Scottish Government executive agency charged with supporting quality and improvement in Scottish education.